1.
Wolves have an interesting way of raising their young. When a female wolf is ready to give birth, she digs a hole. Within this hole, she has her babies. While she is taking care of these babies, other wolves bring her food. After they get a little older, the mother can leave them while she goes off to hunt with other members of the group. Then, instead of the mother, another female will stay behind to guard the young wolves.
2. Green tea has a long history in Japan and strong ties with Japanese culture. Because of this, one might think that green tea comes from a plant unique to Japan. However, all tea, no matter what its color or taste, comes from the same plant. Then what causes the differences in taste and color? They are, in fact, the result of different ways of growing the tea and treating it after it is picked. 3. Physical gestures may have different meanings in different cultures, and misunderstanding these signals can sometimes be embarrassing. I once had an experience which I have never forgotten. Some years ago, I took a small group of foreign students to Kyoto. I counted them with the index finger, which is common in Japan. But one of them became quiet and looked puzzled. When I asked him what was the matter, he replied, "In my country, we count people with our eyes. We use our fingers to count pigs." 4. Vitamin C plays an important role in keeping us healthy. Most mammals produce it in their livers, so they never suffer from a lack of it. Curiously, however, some mammals, such as humans and apes, cannot do so. What happens when you lack this important vitamin? You might see black and blue marks on your skin. Your teeth could suffer too. The pink area around them might become soft and bleed easily. These are just a couple of good reasons to eat plenty of fresh fruit. 5.
The word drug means anything that even in small amounts produces changes in the body, the mind, or both. This definition, however, does not clearly separate drugs from what we usually think of as food. The difference between a drug and a poison is also unclear. All drugs become poisons in large amounts, and many poisons are useful drugs in carefully controlled amounts. Is alcohol, for instance, a food, a drug, or a poison? It can be any of the three, depending on how we use it.
6.
Have you ever thought about what skin does for us? Most of us are aware that skin protects us from liquid, heat, cold, dirt, and bacteria. But that is not its only job. For instance, the skin is where our bodies make the vitamin D that we need. Another function has to do with the sense of touch. Without that sense, we could not feel any difference between rough and smooth surfaces. Skin can even help us determine if someone is sick. The wrong color, slightly gray or very pale, may be a sign of disease. Skin may reflect a person's mental state too. Unusual sweating, for example, may be a sign that a person is nervous or under stress.
7.
Western clothes have buttons on the right for men. This is convenient because the majority of men are right-handed. It is easier for them to use the right hand when buttoning up. Why then do women's clothes have buttons on the left, even though most women are also right-handed? Is this a kind of discrimination? In fact, there is a reason why women's buttons are on that side. In the past, buttons were quite expensive, and only very rich people could afford them. Women in such wealthy families had servants who dressed them. Therefore, to make it easier for the servants, buttons were put on the left.
8. The color purple has often been regarded as a symbol of wealth and power, but the dye used to produce it did not have an elegant beginning. An ancient people living along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea first discovered how to make the dye from murex snails, small sea animals with hard shells. Unlike other snails, murex snails give off a strong-smelling liquid that changes color when it comes into contact with air and light. From this liquid, the people produced the purple dye. If we visit the places where the dye was produced, we might still be able to see the shells of murex snails. Let us hope we cannot smell them. 9.
The smile may no longer be an effective way to mask one's true feelings. Some psychologists have claimed that true smiles and false smiles use different muscles. For example, in the true smile, the muscles surrounding the eyes tighten, while the cheek muscles pull the corners of the lips upward. On the other hand, in the false smile, the muscles between the eyebrows move slightly, while the muscles around the mouth pull the corners of the lips downward. If the psychologist's claim is proven to be true, perhaps people will worry less about what they say and more about which muscles to use when they smile.
10. When English-speaking people talk about hot food, are they saying the food is spicy like curry? Or are they talking about its temperature, as in hot coffee? These two different meanings of hot may seem confusing to Japanese students, but as a matter of fact, the word is the right one for describing the way the body responds to spice and heat. A simple explanation would go something like this. When we eat or drink, the same nerves in the mouth react both to spicy chemicals in the food and to a rise in temperature. The English expression, therefore, reflects this fact about the human body. 11. People today are worried about food safety. As a result, the popularity of organic farming of fruits and vegetables is increasing. But what exactly does organic farming mean? It is probably easier to explain what organic farming is not. Organic farming does not use pesticides or fertilizers. Instead, this style of farming uses natural methods to protect plants and help them grow. So, organic agricultural products are thought to be generally safer than non-organic ones. In the United States, about 2% of all food is grown using organic methods. The U.S. government officially licenses farms as organic if they pass an examination. Presently, there are about 10,000 licensed farmers in the U.S., and this number is growing by about 20% a year. 12. In addition to food safety, another reason for the popularity of organic fruits and vegetables is that they taste better. This is why many restaurants only buy organic products. A lot of people think organic farming is not competitive compared to other methods because it cannot grow the same quantity of food. However, new research has shown that organic farming only grows, on average, about 5% less than non-organic methods. Still, organic food today is more expensive than non-organic food. But when the environmental and health costs of non-organic farming are considered, such as the pollution of water by pesticides, most people would agree that the higher price of organic farming is in fact a small price to pay for our health and safety. 13.
The knowledge of mathematics developed rapidly in Europe and North America after the Industrial Revolution. But the study of mathematics was carried out many centuries before in other countries, like China. Over 2,000 years ago, the Chinese began their study of numbers, mostly related to astronomy and the perfection of a calendar. Already as early as 200 BC, they had written a textbook on mathematics that was called The 9 Chapters on the Mathematical Art. Interestingly, the ideas in this book seem to have been developed in China without any influence from Europe or other regions.
14.
Various other books on mathematics appeared in the following centuries. But by the 5th century, it seems that the Chinese already had the concept of negative numbers and perhaps also had the concept of zero. Around the 13th century, Chinese mathematicians were solving equations using methods that Europeans would not discover until 500 years later. Unfortunately, near the end of the 14th century, the leaders of China began to be critical of math and science. Because of this change in attitude, people turned away from the study of math to study plants and medicine instead. It wasn't until the 19th century that the Chinese would become interested in math again, but this time under the influence of European mathematical knowledge.
15. Genes, the basic parts of cells which are passed down from parents to children, may have something to do with human behavior. In an experiment, scientists put flies into a glass tube and placed a light at the end of it. Some of the flies began flying toward the light. Some began walking, and some did not move at all. On the basis of the flies' actions, they were separated into different groups: flies that love light, flies that like light, and flies that like the dark. The researchers found that these 3 groups of flies had variations in a particular set of genes. This suggested to the researchers that the variations in these genes might explain the differences in the flies' behaviors. If genes influence behaviors in flies, why not in humans too? 16.
Ben Hemmons is the father of 3 children, including 4-year-old Sophie. According to medical experts, it is normal for kids around this age to catch colds 4 to 5 times a year. In adults, the ratio is about 2 to 3 times a year, for reasons that are not completely clear. However, says Dr. Ronit Mishori of Georgetown University Hospital, many people believe that it is possible to become immune to the common cold so that one gets fewer and fewer colds as he ages. There are about 200 types of virus that cause the common cold. Yet people think that once you get infected one time, you develop immunity for the rest of your life. This is entirely wrong, she claims. There are simply too many different viruses, many of which change in slight ways as they pass from person to person.
17.
English is a language with an enormous number of words. But how many English words are there? Most dictionaries used by college students have about 200,000 words, while most full-length dictionaries have about 300,000 to 600,000. Meanwhile, an organization called the Global Language Monitor positively claims that there are exactly 1,019,729 English words. But counting the number of words in English is not an easy task. First of all, many words that we use in English today were originally words in other languages. Should the words sushi or tsunami be considered English words now that they are frequently used? Then there is the question of words that were used centuries ago but are no longer used today. Should they be counted too? What about words that are only used in certain regions of a country?
18.
And the list of questions goes on. Should we count the verb, the adjective, the noun, and other forms of a word as separate words? In other words, would drive, driving, and driver be counted as separate words? Should a compound word be counted as one word, or should each of the words in it be counted separately? How about the huge number of technical and scientific terms? Finally, to add to the difficulties of counting words, we need to consider new words that are being created all the time. The constantly changing nature of language is frustrating for anyone trying to count words. But this is also what makes language so interesting. English, like other languages, always offers something new to learn.
19. Traditions and customs based on superstitions and religion have been an important aspect of weddings in all cultures. They vary greatly from one country to another, and sometimes even between different ethnic groups in a particular country. Though many traditions and customs have been forgotten through the years, many of today's wedding ceremonies have their beginnings in ancient beliefs and customs that originated in medieval times. In a Christian wedding, the bride usually wears a white wedding gown to show that she is pure. White was a color that was once believed to keep evil spirits away. On the other hand, in Hinduism, white signifies the color of death. A Hindu bride usually wears a red dress with gold stitching. In China, both the bride and groom are dressed in red, which is a color associated with celebration and good fortune. 20. In many cultures, after the wedding, it is traditional for the groom to carry the bride over the threshold of their new home. This custom originated from the belief that bad luck may fall on the bride if she enters a new home with her left foot first. The custom of throwing rice or flowers at the newly married couple to wish them fertility and prosperity originated in Asia and later became popular in America. At a traditional Japanese wedding, it is considered unlucky to use words like cut, separate, or leave. Though weddings in many parts of the world still continue to be rituals that reflect ethnic, cultural, and social backgrounds, contemporary weddings incorporate more meaningful customs better suited to today's values. 21.
When we watch kittens and puppies playing, we realize that through play they are learning how to live. They learn various physical skills, such as how to jump over barriers without getting hurt. They also learn social interaction. For example, if a kitten bites his sister too hard, she will get angry and bite him back. These physical and social skills form part of the training that young animals need in order to grow up. Just as kittens and puppies learn about how to live through play, so do children. But in present-day Japan, especially in cities, there is not much space for children to play in. Children need to release their energy for their mental and physical health. They need space, especially outdoors, so that they can run, jump, and yell.
22.
Another point to consider is how much time children have to play. Some people say that 4 to 5 hours a day of playing outdoors with others is necessary, even for 12-year-olds. It is very doubtful, however, whether any Japanese children get that much free time. Concerned about their future in an increasingly competitive society, parents generally tell their children to study more. Very few would tell them to go out and play. What do these children do at home when they are not studying? They tend to spend time by themselves. They play video games or watch TV, for instance. These activities do not teach them how to get along with others. This can only be learned through playing with other children. They need to play without being told what to do by adults in order to learn about leadership and group harmony on their own. Outdoor space is particularly suitable for this purpose. Children need a proper outdoor environment where they can freely spend their time playing with friends.
23. There is much debate on the origin of the game of football. The Japanese and Chinese claim to have invented a sport similar to modern soccer many centuries ago. In comparison to modern soccer, the Japanese game of kemari was a game that used a large ball stuffed with sawdust. This version used a field which was set up by choosing 4 trees. These trees were usually cherry, maple, pine, and willow. Many large houses in Japan would grow these trees to make a field for kemari. Kemari was normally played with 2 to 12 players. China's version, tsuchu, involved players hitting a leather, fur-stuffed ball into a small hole. As in soccer, no player could use his hands during play. It was considered an honor to be part of a team. The first international soccer, or tsuchu match, is believed to have been held in China around 50 BC. 24. The emperor of the Han Dynasty was an avid early player and fan of tsuchu. This spread the popularity of tsuchu all over China. Some people in China claim that it is even possible tsuchu could go back to 5000 BC. The British claim that soccer was created in the 8th century in Britain. It was not a recreational sport at the time, but a war game. It was a violent game, and serious injury and even death were not uncommon. It was not until 1815, when Eton College set up a series of rules for the game, that it became a less violent sport. At that time, colleges began to play using similar rules. In 1848, the rules were set by Cambridge University. In the Cambridge rules, shin kicking and carrying the ball were forbidden. This is where rugby and soccer developed into 2 different sports. 25.
A fly can do one thing extremely well: fly. Recently, a team of British scientists declared that the common housefly is the most talented aerodynamicist on the planet. superior to any bird, bat, or bee. A housefly can make 6 turns a second, hover, fly straight up, down, or backward, land on the ceiling, and perform various other show-off maneuvers. And it has a brain smaller than a sesame seed. Michael Dickinson, who studies fly flight in his lab at the California Institute of Technology, says the housefly isn't actually the best flyer. Hoverflies are the be-all and end-all, he says. They can hover in one spot, dash to another location, and then race back to their original hovering point, precisely. Scientists, engineers, and military researchers want to know how creatures with such small brains can do that. Maybe they could reverse engineer a fly to make a robotic device that could reconnoiter dangerous places, such as earthquake zones or collapsed mines.
26.
Dickinson's laboratory works with fruit flies. Researchers put them in chambers and manipulate the visual field, filming the flies in super slow motion, 6,000 frames a second. Dickinson is interested in knowing how flies avoid collisions. He has found that certain patterns, such as 90-degree turns, are triggered by visual cues and 2 equilibrium organs on their backs that function like a gyroscope. Flies have only a dozen muscles for maneuvering, but they're loaded with sensors. In addition to their compound eyes, which permit panoramic imagery and are excellent at detecting motion, they have wind-sensitive hairs and antennae. They also have 3 light sensors on the tops of their heads, which tell them which way is up. Roughly 2/3 of a fly's entire nervous system is devoted to processing visual images. They take all this sensory data and boil it down to a few basic commands, such as go left and go right.
27. The past 30 to 40 years have seen a huge increase in the number of children who suffer from allergies, and scientists are still looking for the explanation. Some have blamed increased air pollution, but it has also been found that allergies are common not only among children in the city, but also among children in the countryside, where pollution is typically much lower. A currently popular explanation for the rise in allergies is the so-called hygiene hypothesis. The basic idea is that young children brought up in an environment which is too clean are more at risk of developing allergies. Nowadays, people bathe and wash their clothes more frequently than in the past. And thanks to vacuum cleaners, homes are less dusty too. One result of all these changes is that in their early lives, children are exposed to fewer allergens, substances that can cause allergies. And this means that their bodies cannot build up natural immunity to them. Simply put, exposure to allergy-causing substances is necessary for natural protection against them to develop. 28. The trend towards smaller families also means that young children encounter fewer allergens in the home. In fact, it is known that children who have older brothers and sisters are more resistant to allergies. The same is true of children who share their home with a pet. Such children are much less likely to develop the very common allergy to cat or dog hair, for example. Scientists agree that being exposed to a wider range of allergens early in life helps children to develop greater immunity. There is, however, Also, some data suggesting that genetics, family income, and even the parent's level of education may play a part in how likely a child is to suffer from allergies. Thus, although the hygiene hypothesis is an important area for research, we cannot yet be sure that too much attention to cleanliness is the only explanation for the enormous rise in the number of allergy victims. 29. People may decide to study foreign languages for various reasons. They may do so for the immediate purpose of satisfying the requirements of some public examination, or of getting greater fun and enjoyment out of a holiday abroad. Business people may have to deal directly or indirectly with various kinds of information from abroad. Research workers may realize the importance of being able to read the latest reports of advances made in their studies as soon as they are published in foreign journals, without waiting for a translator, who may or may not have the ability to make an exact translation with 100% accuracy. People may be keenly interested in the activities of a foreign nation for political reasons. They may need information about current affairs that foreign newspapers and journals alone can deliver. Students of literature must surely be able to read great works firsthand. 30. Learning a new language implies entering a new world, and it inevitably leads to a widening of intellectual experience. Learning a new language well enough to be able to understand it when heard, to speak it, read it, and write it, is such hard training that we certainly need some strong urge to drive us on. The 4 distinct and separable activities just mentioned, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, call for constant, preferably daily exercise. These activities are concerned in varying degrees with 4 aspects of language study: pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, and idiom. It is useful to keep these 4 activities and 4 aspects clearly in mind. Learning a new language calls for no great originality of mind or critical talent, but it does demand an eager intellectual curiosity and a constant and lively interest in the endless ways in which human ideas may be expressed. It demands quick observation, first of all, reasonable ability to mimic and imitate, good powers of association and generalization, and a good memory. 31.
On April 4th, 2003, Glenn Keane, one of Walt Disney's most respected animators, called for a meeting to discuss the war breaking out at the studio. Disney's animators had settled into 2 opposing camps: those who were skilled in computer animation and those who refused to give up their pencils. Keane, a 31-year veteran who created the Beast for Beauty and the Beast and Ariel for The Little Mermaid, was a Disney traditionalist. But after a series of experiments to see whether he could create a computer-animated ballerina, his opposition softened. So he invited the 50 animators to discuss the pros and cons of both art forms, calling his seminar The Best of Both Worlds.
32.
For an hour, Keane listed the pluses and minuses of each technique while the other animators listened quietly. After a few questions, the crowd burst into chatter as animators shouted over one another. some arguing that computers should not replace people, and others expressing fears that they would be forced to draw by hand. In a recent interview, Keene recalled that Kevin Geiger, a computer animation supervisor, then stood up and demanded of him, "If you can do all this cool stuff that you're talking about, that you want to see in animation, but you have to give up the pencil to do it, are you in?" Keene hesitated before answering, "I'm in." 3 weeks later, the company's animators were told that Disney would concentrate on making computer-animated movies, abandoning a 70-year-old hand-drawn tradition in favor of a style popularized by newer and more successful rivals, like Pixar Animation Studios and DreamWorks Animation.
33.
The results were nothing short of a cultural revolution at the studio, which is famous for the hand-drawn classics championed by its founder, Walt Disney, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Peter Pan. 2 years and a half after that decision, Disney released Chicken Little, the first of 4 computer-animated films developed at the newly reorganized studio. The company hoped that this movie, along with others like Meet the Robinsons, American Dog, and Keene's Rapunzel Unbraided, would return Disney to its past glory. There was a lot more than pride, however, riding on its success. Animation was once Disney's heart, a profitable lifeline that fed the company's theme park, book, and home video divisions. And restoring profit was as essential to Disney in those days as regaining its reputation.
34. Although cats appear to perform most actions instinctively, they also seem to react to human behavior and adapt themselves to it. For instance, some cats behave as if they understood their owner's feelings. One cat owner told of the time when she lay crying and exhausted on her bed, and her cat put its front legs around her head and comforted her. Cats also sometimes appear to be able to understand the function of many of the things human beings use. For example, some cats, when they bring a captured bird or mouse into the house, put it on a plate or in a dish. There are also cats who know how to open a door by turning the handle. Furthermore, a lot of cats seem to understand what their owners say. A writer tells a story of her cat who used to sleep on top of her word processor. At first, when the cat's tail got in the way of the screen, the owner would push its tail away and say, "Move your tail, please." Eventually, she didn't have to push the tail, but only had to tell the cat to move it. 35.
Touching is the language of physical intimacy. Because of this, touch can be the most powerful of all the communication channels. In May 1985, Bridget Gurney was trapped for 6 hours beneath a collapsed construction crane in New York City. Throughout her ordeal, she held the hand of a rescue worker, who stayed by her side as heavy machinery removed the tons of twisted steel from her crushed legs. A stranger's touch gave her hope and the will to live. Touch appears to affect the sexes differently. Women sometimes react much more favorably to touch than men. In an interesting study, psychologists asked a group of nurses to lightly touch a patient once or twice shortly before the patient underwent surgery. The touching produced a strongly positive reaction, but only among women. It appeared to lower their blood pressure and anxiety levels both before and after surgery. For men, however, the touching proved to be very upsetting. Their blood pressure and anxiety levels both rose. The psychologists suspect that because men are taught to be more stoic, that is, to hide their feelings and to ignore their fears, the touching rattled them by reminding them that life is fragile.
36.
How do you feel about touching and being touched? Salespeople think they know. Research shows that it is harder to say no to someone who touches you when making a request. But not everyone is happy about being touched by a stranger. Think about your own comfort level when you find yourself in a crowd. Are you relaxed and loose, or does physical contact make you feel awkward and tense? In some situations, we can't help touching each other. Take a crowded elevator, for instance. Normally, people stand shoulder to shoulder and arm to arm, accepting such close contact without complaint. The rule seems to be, touch only from shoulder to elbow, but nowhere else. Even though the Japanese are regarded as a non-touching society, their crowded cities force them to be jammed into subways and trains. Edward T. Hall, an anthropologist, says the Japanese handle their uneasiness about being packed into public places by avoiding eye contact and drawing within themselves emotionally, thus touching without feeling.
37.
The Internet is very much like television in that it takes time away from other pursuits, provides entertainment and information, but in no way can compare with the warm, personal experience of reading a good book. This is not the only reason why the Internet will never replace books, for books provide the sufficient knowledge of a subject that sitting in front of a computer monitor cannot provide. We can transfer text from an Internet source, but the artistic quality of sheets of transferred text leaves much to be desired. A well-designed book makes the reading experience important. The book is still the most compact and economical means of conveying a lot of knowledge in a convenient package. And this is what makes it popular. The idea that one can carry in one's pocket a play by Shakespeare, a novel by Charles Dickens, or the Bible in a small book with a stiff paper cover is incredible. We take such uncommon convenience for granted, not realizing that the book itself has undergone quite an evolution since the production of the Gutenberg Bible in 1455 and Shakespeare's Book of Plays in 1623.
38.
Not only has the art and craft of printing and making books been greatly improved over the centuries, but the great variety of subject matter now available in books is surprising, to say the least. In fact, the Internet requires the constant entry of authors and their books to obtain the information that makes it a useful tool for research and learning. Another important reason why the Internet will never replace books is because those who wish to become writers want to see their works permanently published as books, something you can hold, see, feel, look through, and read at your leisure without the need for an electric current apart from a lamp. The writer may use a computer instead of a pen and pad, but the finished product must eventually end up as a book if it is to have value to the reading public. The writer may use the Internet in the course of researching a subject just as he may use a library for that purpose, but the end product will still be a book.
39.
Why is it that many people who have suffered a major shock, such as divorce or the death of a family member, seem to be weaker against a variety of major and minor illnesses? One common idea among psychologists has been that people could deal with suffering more effectively if they were able to understand and accept it. Indeed, many experts emphasize the value of expressing thoughts and feelings associated with upsetting events. Recently, a team of medical researchers investigated the links between describing psychologically painful events and long-term health. In one experiment, healthy college students were asked to write about either personally disturbing experiences or ordinary topics over a period of 4 days. In the months afterwards, students who had chosen to reveal their inner thoughts and feelings in their writing visited the health center for illness much less often than those who had written about everyday topics.
40.
In an experiment that followed, another group of healthy students were given the 4-day writing exercise. Some chose to write about highly personal and upsetting experiences, including loneliness, problems with family and friends, and death. When questioned immediately afterwards, they stated that they did not feel any better. However, their blood samples taken before and after the experiment showed evidence of an improved resistance to illness. The white cells that fight off bacteria and viruses had increased their reaction and sensitivity to these invaders. This trend continued over the following 6 weeks, when another blood sample was taken. Individuals who showed the best results were those who wrote about topics that they had actively refrained from telling others about. The researchers proposed that failure to face up to painful experience can be a form of stress itself and can increase the possibility of illness. It follows, then, that actively dealing with a major shock makes possible its understanding and acceptance. The answer is not to suffer in silence. It may not always be possible to talk about personal problems, but writing them down will help the body to fight disease in the long run.
41. The impact of exposure to violent video games has not been studied as extensively as the impact of exposure to TV or movie violence, the researchers write in Psychological Science in the Public Interest. However, on the whole, the results reported for video games to date are very similar to those obtained in the investigations of TV and movie violence. Among the effects of violent game playing are increases in physiological arousal and physically aggressive behavior, such as hitting, kicking, and pulling clothes or hair. Studies also have found a reduction in helpful behavior among youths exposed to violent video games. Males tend to prefer action-oriented video games involving shooting, fighting, sports, action-adventure, fantasy role-playing, and strategy, according to the Michigan State Survey. Females prefer classic board games, trivia quizzes, puzzles, and arcade games. Electronic game playing gets young people involved with technologies and opens up opportunities in high-paying tech careers, notes communications professor Bradley Greenberg of Michigan State. 42. It is believed that these opportunities accrue to boys because they spend more time working with electronic games and computers, says Greenberg. If girls become more involved with technology at an early age, it is likely that the interest in technology will continue into the work world. If females do become more involved in technology fields, including game development, they may create less violent games that promote cooperation rather than aggression. Video games are in 80% of U.S. homes with children. They generated $6 billion in 2000 and $11 billion by 2003. All indications are that the industry will continue to grow at a healthy clip, says Greenberg. The emerging market is for games designed more with girls in mind that engage them for longer periods of time and force them to investigate more the technology behind the games. The next frontier involves transferring video game technology to educational settings and using the young people's fascination with the games to involve them more with innovative teaching technologies. Until that day comes, however, more awareness is needed of the impact of violent games on young people's behavior, Anderson and his colleagues conclude.